Xbox and Sony and PC by extension really aren't catered to the child market anymore. They're not. I just picked up, finally, Pokemon Sword. It's been out for about a year and a half now, I think, at this point. The reason why I never pulled the trigger is just because it came out in November 2019, I think. And there was just so many other things coming out around that time, saving up for Christmas. I just couldn't really justify the £50. I was excited to play it. I've not played a Pokemon game since the Game Boy Advance days, maybe the DS days. Anyway, it was at least a decade I'd been out of the game. So I was really excited. I really liked the British aesthetic they were bringing to the game, for the windmills and all that stuff. I always wanted to play a 3D Pokemon game. I'd rather a Zelda-style 3D Pokemon game, which we're now getting in the future, apparently. I can't remember what it was called again, I'm sorry. But yeah, long story short, I just couldn't afford to buy it at the time. And it's an issue I find with most Nintendo products. Now, this article comes from Sean Buckley over at CNET. The article's called "Nintendo Switch Games Are Too Expensive, but It Makes Total Sense." When The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword launched for the Nintendo Wii back in 2011, the motion-controlled adventure was priced at $49.99. This week, Nintendo announced a remastered version of the game for Switch, The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword HD, priced at $59.99 US, adding $1 to the price tag for every year that's passed since the original game's release. Nintendo fans everywhere let out a quiet sigh of resignation. Skyward Sword, a 10-year-old Wii game, is more expensive than it was when it first came out a decade ago, and it's going to stay expensive, because first-party Nintendo Switch games almost never get price drops. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, a port of the Nintendo Wii U game that launched in 2017, still sells for full price almost 4 years later. Super Mario Odyssey does as well, as does the Breath of the Wild, Super Mario Party, and New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. Everyone dislikes this. In fact, it feels wrong. Nintendo's competitors like Sony routinely and permanently drop prices for big budget AAA games. God of War for PS4 launched in April 2018 for $59.99, but by October the price was permanently lowered to just $39.99. Today it costs just under $20. Marvel's Spider-Man was released the same year and was given a similar $20 price drop in February 2019. Xbox, PlayStation and PC games often see big price drops within the first year, or not long after. It feels like an industry standard practice. As buyers, we've come to expect it. And that expectation makes Nintendo's consistently high prices feel jarring, like Nintendo's being unfair. But Nintendo isn't being unfair, it's just following our lead. Because as much as we'd like to pay less for Nintendo Switch versions of re-released Wii U games, we don't. We pay full price, and continue to pay full price, no matter how old the games are. As usual, math and economics ruin everything. According to Nintendo's latest fiscal earnings report, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has sold 33 million copies since launch, earning Nintendo a potentially staggering windfall. And the game is still a top seller. It's still the 5th best-selling game on Nintendo Switch eShop to this day, and Amazon's 9th best-selling Nintendo Switch game. To put that in perspective, one of the PS4's best-selling games, God of War, had sold an estimated 12 million copies by 2019, and Amazon's 23rd best-selling PS4 game. PlayStation had to cut its price to keep its buyers interested in Kratos. Meanwhile, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has been selling in record numbers at full price ever since launch. Nintendo games are expensive. Everybody hates it. And yet Nintendo has no reason to drop the prices. It's selling more copies of its games than its competitors and making more money on each copy sold. And for better or worse, Nintendo fans have gotten used to expensive games. Nintendo has cultivated an expectation of expensive games, and even though we don't like it, we've come to accept it. Customers have spoken with their wallets, and Nintendo has heard us loud and clear. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is worth $59.99, despite being a port of decade-old Wii game that originally sold for $10 less. It still feels wrong, like Nintendo's being unfair, but the data does not lie. We're going to buy it anyway, and once again, Nintendo will print money. A work colleague of mine, good friend of mine, once referred to Nintendo games as evergreen titles, in the sense that they just never drop price. And, both him and the article writer are both correct. If you go back and try to buy an old DS game off eBay, or if you go back and try and buy an old Game Boy Advance games, they're still up in the 20s and 30s, sometimes even $40, sometimes more for a rarer game. And yeah, I honestly didn't really appreciate that until I heard that term, evergreen. I'd heard evergreen before, obviously. I just meant in relation to Nintendo Switch and Nintendo games in general. They're always going to be in high demand. So knowing that it's never going to drop in price, then eventually you're just going to go ahead and pay full price. In fact, why even bother waiting if you know it's not going to drop in price eventually? You're as well just buying it on day one launch day. Now, I actually think this is an industry-wide issue. I don't think that's the right word. I think it's an industry-wide circumstance that's causing Nintendo to do this, to cultivate this kind of market on their console. Now, what I mean by that is, as much as I was struggling to find the words there, when you look at the types of games that Nintendo offers, Zelda, Pokemon, Animal Crossing, can you name me a game either on Xbox, PlayStation or PC that's like that in terms of tone? No. I think the closest in the last couple of years would be Biomutant, when you're playing that little hamster man. If you want to go further back, Microsoft used to do the Banjo and Kazooie games. What I'm getting at here, and before we go ahead, I'm not going to call Nintendo games terrorists. They're not. Although, obviously, they're highly animated. When you look at Mario, and you look at Luigi's Mansion in particular, they do have that animated thing. Now, Nintendo makes products for people of all ages, but it's enticing to younger people specifically. Xbox and Sony and PC by extension really aren't catered to the child market anymore. They're not. Again, I can't think of a single game. Now, it's not to say that, all games on PlayStation or all games on Xbox aren't suitable for children. We all know everyone's playing Fortnite. Oh, Fortnite, that might actually be a good example. Right, we'll put that next to Biomutant, and that's 2 examples. If you've got any more examples, feel free to put them in the comments below. But Nintendo has a core audience, and that's either children, as they are now, or children who have grew up with Nintendo. People in my generation, I got Pokemon when it first came out over here in the UK, and I bought the Pokemon games consistently right through to, I think Crystal might have been the last one. Oh, Platinum. Did that come before or after Crystal? Who knows? I'll look it up on Wikipedia later. Some people will stick out longer. I did eventually move on to Xbox and stuff like that, but I imagine if you're in your kind of late 20s, early 30s, or even older, I probably imagine that you've played Nintendo consistently, and you're always looking for that next Pokemon game, you're always looking for that next Mario game, and the quality is only getting better throughout the years. Like, you couldn't possibly think the Mario will look any graphically better than it did on the Wii, for example. I booted up Super Mario Odyssey last year. Beautiful game, absolutely beautiful. Looks a bit weird when he's standing beside regular humans in the city world. I can't remember what it's called. But when you're going through the old the Princess Peach's castle in the N64 recreation, it's absolutely beautiful. And even right now I'm saying, okay, can't get more beautiful than this. And I bet you 10 years time I'll be biting my words again. So even though it's a very specific art style that Nintendo pursues in all of its games, really, can you see much difference between Mario, Luigi's Mansion, Breath of the Wild, Pokemon Sword and Shield? Like, yeah, they're different games, obviously, but they've still got that high animated style. It's all about quality. You know what you're expecting, and you know what you're going to get with a Nintendo game. I don't think a Nintendo game's ever had a technical fault at launch. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. Same could technically be said for the other first parties, Xbox and PlayStation, but they will still get day one patches and they'll get updates as they go along, whereas Nintendo just feels like they put a game out, they'll maybe do one patch, and that's it. That's what it feels like to me. Now, me personally, despite now understanding, thanks to the article, why there's a a culture of expensive Nintendo games and evergreen games, as my work colleague put it, I still wait for a discount, and obviously that never happens on the eStore. So when I buy Nintendo Switch games, I wait for them to go pre-owned on eBay. And like you were saying earlier, it's not that much of a difference. I think including postage and packaging, I got Pokemon Sword and Shield for about £40, so that's like £10 off retail. I think I managed to bag Luigi's Mansion for £30, so £20 off retail. So I'm still eventually getting the games at the price that I usually look for in my games, but I'm cheap. What can I say?